Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Please join me this morning in welcoming our speaker, Clancy.
Thank you. My name is Clancy Imislund. I'm an alcoholic. I'm glad to be here. Bud and I have decided to bring you sampling of old white guys today. Old, well-dressed white guys. I just came in on a plane. I didn't have time to go home and get my old clothes on. I hope you'll forgive me. But first, I feel in a warm, Christmassy mood today. So I want to explain something to those of you who might not know. Back in the late 1960s, early 1970s, there was a crazy old guy up in the San Fernando Valley named Bill Davidson. And he had many fixations, one of which was that everyone in AA should remain anonymous, not at the level of press, radio, and films, but from each other. And when they would read the traditions, he would whisper along with the end of them. He'd say, "Principles before personalities." They'd say, "Shut up, Bill. No, it needs to be said." So this went on for a while. And then 3 or 4 young guys, I heard about it, I sponsored one of them, told me that they were mocking Bill. They'd all say, "Principles before personality." Is that right, Bill? Don't say that. Yes, which was all right, who cares? But then some speaker, "We mustn't come in late when I'm speaking." Anyway, the reason I say that is because I'm the landlord here, and if I don't like it, your rent goes up. But some speaker came there from the Sylvan Seed Roast group and heard these going on and thought it was a new spiritual breakthrough they'd missed over at Sylvan Seed Roast. So pretty soon they were chanting Sylvan spirit principles before personalities at the end of the traditions in Sylvan Seed Roast. And then for about 20 years in the Central Valley, there were about 4 groups that go over there and you'd chant principles before personalities. Say, "Why are you saying that?" "I don't know." And it was all right. You said, "Where are you going?" "We're going to speak for the chanters tonight." And then somehow the cork got out of the bottle and the bacilli got into the wind, and pretty soon you heard it in different little meetings here and there. You got principles before personalities, and then it became rampant for a while. And then they were chanting at the end of chapter 5 like they did today. Nobody knows why they're doing that at all. Probably would do it at the end of the promises if they knew what they were. But the interesting thing is that the meeting where it started, part of their format is now, "Please do not chant." It's made a complete circle. So if you're kind of new and you don't know whether to chant or not, you're certainly entitled to chant. You have every right to do that in AA, but you are doing nothing for Alcoholics Anonymous. You are mocking Bill Davidson, and he's been dead since 1975. Just thought you'd like to know that. Something else, I'll give you a little insight into my drinking career. In 1950, I was graduating from the University of Wisconsin. I was there on a GI Bill after having served in the war, and I got drinking a great deal in my junior year, actually the freshman year. But I drank a lot through college, but I had some abilities. I won some trophies for the university, and I was highly thought of as Chief Justice of the Student Court, just hideous. And at the commencement, I gave a talk on behalf of the senior class, thanking everyone. And it was very nice. Then we all got graduated. We came across the stage, and I knew what I got. I got a blank diploma because I had an incomplete in my last quarter. The English teacher, her name is Laura Sutherland, I remember that from 1950, gave me the incomplete, and I explained to her, I can't get to an 8 o'clock class, in the morning, I'm just not prepared. But she gave me the incomplete, so I had to go to summer school to get my degree, and I'd been hired to teach journalism at Duluth-Denfeld High School up in Minnesota. And so I went to work, and I had to get to work. I got a little job at U.S. Rubber Company balancing white sidewall tires, and thinking how I'd been betrayed by this damn university, and I'd done so much for them, and they treated me this way, a veteran. And I used to drink a lot, stop after work, and get drunk. And one night I ran into a woman who turned out to be a traveling saleswoman from some magazine company. And I told her the sad stories. I told everybody that could listen. And she says, gee, you don't, and I looked kind of unkempt, I'd been working all night. She said, you don't seem to be the type of person that would win a lot of trophies for a university. I said, well, I'll show you. And we jumped in her car and drove down to the campus, which was locked, of course, late at night. But I kicked a pane of glass out of the window and reached through. And we went in, and I showed her the trophy case with my pictures and all these things on. And drank it a lot. I don't know exactly what happened, but she slumped to the floor, I think. And I thought she'd had a flat tire, and I was trying to pump her up there. And a policeman's flashlight illuminated the scene. If you ever want to see a passion quencher, let me tell you, that's it. What are you doing there? Nothing anymore, officer. And they arrested us. I mean, they were a little harsh in those days, Took us downtown, booked me for breaking and entering in the night time to commit a felony, and booked her for something. And God, it's dreadful. Next morning, went to court. It was in August. I felt so bad. The judge was a friend of our family, and before I was sitting there, thinking, how can I get out of this? The guy brought in a box. He said, they told me to give you this. I looked at my box, all the stuff I'd had at the university, and a note from the dean saying, I covered for you as long as I can, but I can't cover this one. You're expelled. Kind of bad news. Then I got a telegram from Duluth saying your contract has been abrogated for moral turpitude. And then the judge gave me a rational nonsense. I remember what he said. He said, Clancy. And I was so sorry. I'm so sorry, Judge. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He said, I regret that you're so sorry. I thought, what a strange thing to say. I said, why do you say that, Judge? He said, because when people are as sorry as you are, they're not only sorry for what they've done, but they're instinctively sorry for what they're going to do. I thought, oh, that's nonsense. It wasn't nonsense. And it got worse after that. I went off in the world, and I got a little job as a sports writer, and my life changed considerably. My drinking continued for a long time, and I finally, at the end of some 8 years later, I was thrown out of a Skid Row mission in downtown Los Angeles with my teeth kicked out and everything gone in my life. It was a bad run. But I say what A did for me. Now, I'm not going to tell you how it happened because it takes too long. But in 1980, exactly 30 years after they threw me out, the dean of men at that university had now become the chancellor, and he was retiring. And he named me their Distinguished Alumnus of the Year. And I came back, took my kids all back to, my mother and father were still alive. Oh, I was so pleased with that because I was their only child, and they'd been crying for me for years. And I spoke again at commencement, and wonderful occasion. In fact, I have at the wall of my office, had for a long time, the Distinguished Alumnus of the Year, University of Wisconsin, 1980. But then it got struck me when I got back here. I'm not an alumnus. They got me out of there. So I started sending little funny notes saying, aren't you a little ashamed that you have an alumnus of the year who's not an alumnus? I mean, doesn't that reflect on the university? I did that for several years. Finally, in 1987, they sent me the diploma and said, here's your goddamn diploma, now get off it. So I'm probably the only distinguished alumnus that ever was distinguished 7 years before I graduated. But that's what AA did for me. But I want to talk a little bit this morning, because I was talking about this last night in Las Vegas. They asked me to talk about it. And I know there's a lot of people here who might not be aware of it. It might be very dull for some of you. But there's a lot of talk around why we have all this bother about the singleness of purpose. What's all this singleness of purpose about? My God, isn't it about time we opened our doors and helped people of all sorts of agonies in? Why do we make such a deal out of it? And you have to really go back to a long time ago. Most of us remember or have read about Bill Wilson having a spiritual awakening in the middle of the night in the hospital, Towns Hospital in New York. And even today, it's considered smart to question that, because a few years ago, somebody discovered he'd been treated with belladonna, and belladonna brought about hallucinations. So perhaps he didn't have a spiritual experience at all, maybe just a hallucination. And they asked me about it, and I said, I don't care what he had, it saved my life. I don't care. Saved his life and saved mine, so I don't care. But anyway, he'd been under being advised by a guy that had kind of became a sponsor in the Oxford movement, saying, you got to find a power greater than yourself. He said, I don't hear that religious crap, that doesn't help. And in the middle of the night, he woke up and he had discovered that the doctor had called his wife and told her that he probably would die before he'd get another run like this. He couldn't survive another one. And he was desperate and afraid in the dark. And he cried out, if there's a God there, show yourself. And he wrote later, all of a sudden the room filled up with light. And he heard a wind blowing, and even through the closed windows, he thought, I'm having a psychotic episode. This is dreadful. And but he felt good, but it's just also odd. Then all of a sudden the room got dark again and the wind stopped. He thought, I guess I snapped out. And he told the doctor about it in the morning. He says, Doctor, let me tell you after I've told you what happened. Don't you think I had a psychotic episode? He said. The doctor said, no, Bill, in talking to you, I don't know what you did. But whatever it is, hang on to it. You're changed somehow. And he came out of there, and he somehow associated this with the Oxford Group, which was a religious organization that his friends were in. So we went to the Oxford Group and got involved in it, and had a feeling he'd had a message from God that he could help drunkards. And he began helping drunkards. He went to the Oxford Group every day, and he would bring drunkards. Now, the Oxford Group, what it really boiled down to by that time was well-to-do people meeting in one another's homes and discussing how their spiritual values could be enhanced. I mean, very genteel. And Bill would pick up these street drunks on the way. And these people were a little taken aback, I believe you're vomiting on my shoes, sir. And sometimes you'd take them home, and nobody ever stayed sober. He'd try to tell them about the value of having a higher power. I don't want to hear that shit. It's just on and on. And one morning, Bill got up after 6 months of this, and he looked at his wife, Lois, who'd been a chic society girl when he married her, now old before her time, salt and pepper gray hair, putting on her cheap clothing and putting on her sweater with a patch on the sleeve to go to work as a counter girl in the basement of a cheap department store so they could pay the rent so he could go to the Oxford Group and try to save these drunkards, and none of them ever got saved. And he had a terrible wave of remorse. He said, Lois, I'm sorry. I realize now I made a terrible mistake. I thought I had some sort of calling to help drunkards. But I've been trying to help people for 6 months, and not one person has stayed sober, and I'm done doing it. And right there, my friends, your life and mine hung by a thread about that big. And she turned and said something to him that changed the course of history. And I had lunch with her 40 years ago in Connecticut. I said, how did you ever think that answer, Lois? My God, it's changed the course of history. She said, I don't know. Seems so obvious. He said, not one person has stayed sober. And she said, you did? Oh, yeah. That's why old timers don't have much hair in front. You just go through life going, oh, yeah, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. So he kept going, but he realized nothing he was doing was helping. He went down to see Dr. Towns in the Towns Hospital. And the doctor said, Bill, I don't know what to tell you, but I know this. You're trying to get them sober through religion. I know very few drunks ever got sober through religion. They have a defense against it. In fact, they have a defense against most everything. Drunkards seem to have an invisible shield around them that any advice you give just bounces off. Boom, boom. And they say thanks, but they don't mean it. Boom. You know, when you stop thinking, we've all had enough advice to last us 1,000 years from people. He said, but the problem is to get through that wall. He said, let me suggest something to you. Instead of telling them about Jesus or God, tell them why you drank and how you feel and what drinking does for you. He said, I can't do that because I don't know what it is. I hear you people talk about it, but I don't know anything about it. Try that. Bill said, well, I'll try it. I just see what good will I do? But he got home, and it turned out he had an opportunity to go to some people had noticed that he was staying sober. He'd been active on Wall Street when he was successful. And they said, Bill, you're coming around. We got an opportunity for you. We got this company out in Akron, Ohio. We're trying to get the proxies for. You go out there and do this, and you'll be president of that company, and you'll be on your way, pal. But if you blow this, don't even bother to come back, because you'll never work around here again. So off he went to Akron, and the deal blew up. And he stood in a hotel lobby on a hot May morning, looked in his pocket. He had a $10 bill. He could either pay his hotel bill or he could buy a train ticket home, go home and be laughed at and ridiculed again. And he wrote later, over there, I stood in that lobby a few years ago because I'm kind of a romanticist to see what it feels like. Over there's a door with a sign over says cocktails. He said he saw that door and he heard the jukebox coming out, the clink of glasses. And he knew something that any one of us would know, I think. If I just had a couple drinks, I could think of an answer. And away he went. And every step he took, you and I got closer to death. And out of the corner of his eye, I saw across the lobby some payphones. And remember, he'd promised these goofs in the Oxford movement that he would call somebody in the Oxford movement before he did anything drastic. So he went over there to fulfill his function. And in small towns, they used to have over the telephones a listing of the major churches and the ministers and their phone numbers. So he called the first one. He said, my name is Bill Wilson. I'm a rumhound from New York, and I got to talk to somebody in the Oxford movement. The man said, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm writing a sermon. Please don't bother me. And hung up. Not very funny when you think about it. He called the second one, no answer. Called the third one, no answer. Called the fourth one. He said, I'm sorry, sir, I can't help you. And I don't know about you, but I suspect I would say, well, I did what I said I would. I'll just have a couple drinks and I'll be all right. But he noticed the last name on the list was a funny name, Walter Tunk. So he said, well, I don't want to miss Walter Tunk. Let him reject me too. So he called Walter Tunk, who turned to be the only person in Akron who could have helped him. Another one of the funny little circumstances in our history. He says, funny you should ask. I have a very wealthy parishioner out in West Akron, and she's a member of the Oxford group. And she was telling me that there's a doctor in their group who just admitted he was a drunkard this week, and they didn't know what to do with him. But maybe your friend could talk to him. And Dr. Tongue, let me talk to Mrs. Smith and see if the doctor is available. So she called Mrs. Smith, and this is another funny little thing. The phone rang and rang and rang and rang. And just as she was hanging up, she heard a voice say, hello, I'm sorry I was out in the yard. Just those few seconds saved our life. And told her what had happened, and Mrs. Smith said, well, I'd like to have him talk to this man, but he's passed out on the floor today. He can't talk today. But maybe you can bring him out tomorrow somewhere. And the woman said, bring him out to my mansion. Bring him out to my guest house, West Akron. Drive out here, and I'll get a hold. So she called back the minister, who called back Bill, who was just about to leave the phone booth, had been standing there, but nothing happened for a long time. and told him how to get the streetcar. So the next day, they all went out to this house, and Bill took the streetcar out there. And the doctor was hung over, he couldn't drive. So he had his 16-year-old son drive, who later on became quite an active speaker at Al-Anon, and I got to be a good friend with him. I always enjoy hearing him discuss that. Driving out there, his sister in the front seat and his father and the mother in the back seat, and his father saying, "Ann, because it's Mother's Day today and I've spoiled it for you, I'll go talk to this guy, but I'm not going to listen to any damn lecture. I'm sick and tired of hearing lectures about my drinking that don't help, but they just make me crazy. Now, I'll give him 10 minutes, and that's what I'm going to give him. And I'll do it for you for Mother's Day, honey." So they went out there, they had a bite to eat, and then they went in this room, the doctor and this ex-Wall Street guy, his failure, and they were in there for several hours. And they came out, and the doctor said to his wife, "My God, Ann, I can't believe it. That's the first man I ever talked to who seemed to know how I feel and why I drink and what drinking, how it empowers me." He said, "My God." He said, "Bill, could you stay with us a couple of weeks and just talk some more about this?" And Bill thought, let's see. I have no way to get out of town. Yes, I can stay. So he moved in with him for a couple of weeks. And every day, Bill and Dr. Bob talked about spiritual values and how you enhance your belief in God and how you get values with God and the deep meanings of the Oxford movement. At the end of 2 weeks, the doctor was just glowing. He said, "Bill, I haven't felt this good in years. This weekend, there's going to be a national convention of the American Medical Association in Atlantic City. I was there last year and I was drunk, and they ridiculed me and made fun of me. And I ought to go there this year and show them that, by God, I've made a difference." He said, "You stay with my wife and kids, and I'll be back Tuesday morning." And away he went. Tuesday morning, 7 o'clock, the phone rang. Mrs. Smith answered the phone. Woman said, "Oh, Mrs. Smith, this is Dr. Bob's office nurse. They carried him off the train today so drunk he couldn't walk. And the station agent knew that I worked for him, so he called me, and I came down to the station, and a cab driver, and I've got him up here on the floor of his office. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know he was trying so hard, but apparently it didn't work." So Bill and Mrs. Smith went on and got this drunk. Not only drunk, but the worst type of drunk, a crying drunk. Jesus, they're sickening. "I'm so sorry. Now you're sorry." Boom, you know. They took him home and put him to bed, this crying old sick, phony bastard. And a couple of days later, he suddenly sat up and says, "What day is it?" He says, "It's Thursday, Bob." It's Thursday. "Oh, my God. I've got to do a surgery today, a cancer surgery. Look at my hand. I can't hold a knife. My God, they'll take my license because I'm on probation now. My God, what do I do?" So Bill and his wife got him up, and they bathed him and showered him and put him in his clothes. And his new friend Bill bought him a couple beers and some drugs to tide him, slow us down. He says, "Okay, I believe I could do it now. I'll be back at 2 o'clock. And away he went. 2 o'clock came, he didn't come back. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, everybody knows, son of a bitch is drunk again. 6 o'clock, he burst in the door. "Boy, I'm home, I feel great." He said, "Well, Bill, Bob, you're cold sober. Where you been?" He said, "When I was doing that surgery, I was thinking, in the Oxford group, they want you to make amends to people you've hurt. But I thought a doctor shouldn't have to make amends. But then I realized I'm really a human being more than a doctor, so I've been all day making amends all over Akron to people. And I feel wonderful." And that was June 10th, 1935, which they considered the birthday of Alcoholics Anonymous, because neither one of those guys drank again. Of course, it wasn't the birthday of Alcoholics Anonymous, because there wasn't any Alcoholics Anonymous. There was just two guys in the Oxford group. But they realized something. They realized that talking about spirituality hadn't kept Dr. Bob sober. It didn't keep any of the people sober Bill had worked with. They had to talk to them about how they felt. And Bob said, "I got an idea." And he called a friend of his, a nun up at the hospital, named Sister Ignatia, who incidentally, I heard speak in 1960 at the International Convention, and I kissed her on the cheek. And I don't remember if the rest of this happened, but it sounds like it should. I said, oh, should I kiss a nun? And I think she said, as long as you don't get in the habit. I don't know. I don't remember every little detail. I mean, But because in those days, drunks and alcoholics could not get into the hospitals. You had to have something physical. So most people had gastritis or gastrointestinal infections that would get in the hospital to sober up. And he called up this nurse up there and Sister, and he said, yes, I got a guy here as a lawyer from Louisville, been in town a while, and came here to get away from his drinking, and it got worse, of course. And maybe you could talk to him. I'll have to talk to his wife, though, because she would have a say in it. And I heard him talk many years ago, too. His name was Bill D., and he said, I was laying in that hospital bed in Akron, Ohio. And my wife came in to me and said, there are two men who want to talk to you about your drinking. And I told her, absolutely not. I am talking to no one about my drinking again. I am sick of talking to people about my drinking, and don't ever bring it up. But my wife was a rather strong woman. So I talked to those two fellas, and they never talked about my drinking once. They talked about their drinking and how they felt and what it felt like to drink. And I thought, my God, I've never heard anybody describe me. He said, I've been so impressed. I've been with him. I was number 3, and I've been with him ever since. And he became number 3 in the chain. And all the way down the chain, it became so clear that alcohol, for example, the book Alcoholics Anonymous is a great book, and we all admire it. But once in a while, some goof will naysayer, oh, I read part of this in another book. And this book is not so original. A lot of these thoughts are taken from somewhere else. Absolutely right. The book is not an original book. Bill wrote it, but it's not an original book. What makes it impressive is that it's designed to break through that wall. It is designed for people to say, oh my God, that's me. To identify. Identification is the secret that makes Alcoholics Anonymous work. That is all. Without that, it's just information. And nobody ever stayed sober on information, not alcoholics who are type. And nobody on the basis of religious, maybe 1 in a million on a religious conversion. But Bill had to write about that book. In fact, there's only one thing I know of that was changed in the steps from the very first edition. Very first edition said, Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And after the book came out, Bill's followers came up and said, Jesus, Bill, you didn't have any religious experience as a result of these steps. You hadn't even thought of the steps yet. You were in a hospital. You had some sort of a celestial experience. None of us have had that experience. How can we stay sober? He said, but you're staying sober by doing these actions. I know, but when do we get our spiritual experience? And they somehow realized something that no one had ever thought of before, that these series of actions, taken over a period of time, bring about a progressive spiritual experience. Little by little. Not the way Bill Wilson got his, whoom, but the way we get ours. Make amends to that bitch, are you crazy? Yeah. And so the next printing of the book, they changed the 12th step, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. It's been that way ever since, which is the secret of Alcoholics Anonymous. But over the years, from time to time, there have been efforts to change AA. But the whole thing is this, is based on identification. Let me tell you something interesting. When I was new in the late 1950s and early 1960s, a guy named Jim Willis, good friend of mine, he was a husband of a woman named Sybil. I knew that. That's what am I going to say next, Norman? I used to be his sponsor, it's all right. But he was a gambler and an alcoholic, and he got sober, and he was so happy. He brought his gambler friends to AA and said, "Listen to this, boy, you'll be all right." what do we care what these old juicers did? You know, you know. And he just, we don't want to listen to that, Jim. That's nonsense. They wouldn't even go. So he had an idea. He wrote to New York and became the first person to ever get permission to use the steps for something besides Alcoholics Anonymous. And he formed Gamblers Anonymous, which to this day is the most successful of all the non-AA programs. And you go to a GA meeting, there's Jim Wilson's picture on the wall. And I remember him being so excited about it, telling us all about this new thing. And he traveled around in Chicago, got to start in Chicago, got to start in New York, and successful and doing well. And his wife was so proud of him. He got so busy doing it, he didn't have time to go to AA anymore. So everybody got sad when he got drunk and died. But as they said in GA, he never gambled again, which was important to them. Then a guy in North Hollywood, the North Hollywood Clubhouse, who was an alcoholic and a heroin addict, got sober and clean, and started bringing his heroin addicts to meetings. Hey, man, chill. I don't hear that step shit. Man. So he wrote to New York, became the second one to get permission to use the 12 steps. Didn't mean to strike a nerve. He became the second one successful, and he formed Narcotics Anonymous over in the Valley. It became something successful. Then some people out here in the marina who were hung up on cocaine, a little better type alcoholic or cocaine addict, they got permission to use made Cocaine Anonymous. Then a woman in the Mid-Wilshire district down around Fairfax got permission to use it for Overeaters Anonymous. And those are the four major programs outside of AA that are running now. And they are established for one thing. They used the same book for a long time. They eventually all wrote their own books, but not much different than ours. But so that the people would identify. They would hear other addicts talking to them. Cocaine addicts would hear cocaine addicts. Overeaters would hear overeaters, on and on. Identification is such an important thing. And I never really understood it till about 1960, I guess. I was sober a couple of years. Didn't look very well, had no front teeth, but I weighed about 120 pounds, scrawny, tawny beast. But I was on fire because I'd been slipping for 10 years, and I was really raring to go for AA, and I gave a talk at the club one day on obsessions. Gave a great talk on obsessions. I mean, I'm an authority on obsessions. Not the recovery from them, just the obsessions. And this rather plump woman came up after and said, "That's wonderful. I've never heard my secret obsessions talked about. Would you mind coming and talk?" She said, "I've started a group over at Christ the King Church on Olympic Boulevard called Overeaters Anonymous. Would you like to come over and talk to our ladies Sunday?" I said, "Sure. Give them something to shoot for." So I went over there, and 8 kind of fat women sitting around a table. And I gave them a great talk on obsessions. I'm sure, I mean, they agreed with what I was saying. Then I sat down, and I was glad that I'd helped these ladies. But then they had a little sharing session, and I couldn't believe my ears. Woman over here, she said that her son this week had his 10th birthday. He is at a military school in Long Beach. She sent her husband down to pick him up, and she took out the birthday cake. She'd bought a lovely birthday cake and took a piece of it to make sure it'd be good. Then another piece, and just one more. By the time I got back, she'd eaten the whole cake, and she felt so embarrassed and sad. That guy's fast asleep. At least he got a good seat. Anyway, she felt so bad. I didn't say anything because I'm a nice guy, but I wanted to say, why don't you just have a piece of cake and forget it, for Christ's sake? What's wrong with you? Yeah. Woman over here talking about eating ice cream. She couldn't wait for her husband to leave home in the morning, rushed down to the drugstore to get ice cream. She just loved ice cream. Ate it. It empowered her. It made her feel like something when she just ate a lot of it. It's just wonderful. And I didn't say anything because I'm too nice a guy, but I wanted to say, no wonder you're fat, for Christ's sake. Anybody fat eating that much ice cream? But a woman over here, it was my favorite, she said, she ate till she couldn't eat anymore. Then she put her finger down her throat and vomited and ate some more. Jesus. I didn't say anything, but I wanted to say, don't bother shaking hands with me. Slimy fingers. I could see doing that for drinking. I've done that for drinking a lot, Kind of Saturday afternoon, sun's still up, and I'm drunk. Here. But what is the difference? I'm intelligent, I'm pretty smart, and I've been around a lot, and I understood exactly what they were saying, but I didn't identify with it, so it was just aberrant behavior. Just aberrant behavior. And that's the way it's going to be for you and me when you try to explain to your folks what alcoholism is. I guess it's helping you, Jimmy, but can't you even have a glass of wine at Christmas? I can't even have a glass of wine in July because I want to be home Christmas, But almost a golden example of why the singleness of purpose in Alcoholics Anonymous. It isn't that we're against people with other addictions. We're not above them, we're not below them. We just don't identify with them. I've been around I've been sober well over 50 years now. And I don't want to sit in a room and hear some guy talk about how he shot up and sniffed up. And I never did that. I think it's weird. It's interesting, like going through the sewers in a glass-bottom boat, Had nothing to do with me. And they don't, that's why even the goofiest newcomer, well, I've only been sober about a week, and Bill is trying to help me there. I'm not sure if I'm in the right place at all, but I'm feeling better, thank you. I identify with him. I identify with his feelings. So that's why we're here. That's why they keep hounding us about remembering the singleness of purpose. Not because we're different or better or below. It's because that's how we communicate sobriety, to get through that wall. Because today, Alcoholics Anonymous at Ohio Street on Sunday afternoon at 10 minutes to 1 is exactly the same thing as it was in Akron, Ohio in 1935 and ever since. It is one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic to help him reduce his feelings of being different, at least enough, so that he will take actions he does not yet believe in. And when that moment comes, the spark of sobriety forms. And then you got to blow on it and surround yourself with people who've got tinder. And pretty soon you get a fire going. Pretty soon it's easy. People say to me, how can you stay sober 53 years? Well, I just kept doing the same things my sponsor told me in 1958. I go to meetings and I try to help people if there's no way out. I simulate interest in tedious stories. And as a result, I sleep well. That's the answer. And that's all you got to do. That's the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. Keep doing what they're doing around here. Don't get too slick. Don't get away from the people who hover around the edges and say, oh, A is all right for your drinking, but for your emotions, you need deeper things. You need medication and psychiatric help. Let me tell you something. In 1956, I was committed to the Texas State Insane Asylum for an indefinite period, perhaps never to get out. When I did get out, they gave me so much Thorazine, I didn't know what my name was. I've been in jail 32 times, which is not a great deal, but it's pretty good for an advertising executive. I have lost everything in my life, and I can tell you this, that if you come here and get a sponsor and try to get involved in the flow of Alcoholics Anonymous, you can stay sober and pretty much comfortable for at least 53 years. I can tell you that from experience. At the end of 53 years, if you're not, come and see me and I'll refund your money. Thank you.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.